Although Ares was known as the infamous god of war for thousands of years, everything changed in 2005. Kratos was named as the modern god of war by a well-known game franchise with lots of fans and a long list of accolades. Totally Awesome Geeks presents a special series revealing the story of the nearly 16-year-old franchise that redefined gaming and the individuals that made it happen. This is the story of God of War. After the first God of War was a tremendous success, the same crew soon began to produce a sequel. Of course, they made some adjustments. Cory Barlog was appointed director and David Jaffe was dubbed creative director of the entire studio. Jaffe would supervise the complete development process. When he complained of not receiving enough compensation for his efforts, however, he left the company. Although Sony already had PlayStation 3 on the market and wanted the sequel to be released on PS3, they decided to make the sequel on PS2. Changing to HD graphics would take the developers much more time. Also, millions of people already owned a PS2. Thus, developers decided to launch the second God of War using the previous engine, Kinetica. God of War 2 was officially announced at the 2006 Game Developers Conference. Barlog said that he studied mythology extensively while working on the script's first few drafts. According to him, mythology is so large that the real difficulty is picking things that really fit within the story of Kratos, as well as being easy to swallow for audiences. He loved the idea of teaching things through storytelling, Greek mythology in this case. Barlog said, "You can't let your story get bogged down by that." He said that in the game, players would see a larger view of Kratos' role within the mythological world. He also said that he liked the idea of a trilogy, but there were no plans as of right now. Terrence C. Carson and Keith Ferguson voiced Kratos and the boat captain respectively. Linda Hunt returned as the narrator, revealed to be Titan Gaia, and Carol Ruggier returned in her final voicing of the character Athena. Both Paul Eating, who had voiced Zeus and the Gravedigger, and Fred Tatasciore, who had voiced Poseidon, returned. However, they did not reprise their roles, but instead voiced the characters Theseus and Typhon, respectively. Corey Burton assumed the role of Zeus, since he had already voiced the character in the 1998 Disney animated film Hercules: Zero to Hero, and the subsequent animated series Hercules. Michael Clark Duncan and Leah Allen Baker voiced the characters of Atlas and Lachesis, respectively. Harry Hamlin voiced the character of Perseus, since he had portrayed the character in the 1981 film Clash of the Titans. Though he was removed early in the game's development, Cam Clark is credited for the voice of Hercules. This time, the team changed the combat system. Now the player could use the rage of the gods at any time and stop it without using the whole thing. And Kratos could now reflect the projectiles, as well as use his chains of Athena as grappling hooks. The team also changed the platforming sections on ropes and walls. Now Kratos could move on the ceiling and rush over certain parts. Many new animations were added. The game now featured flying segments. God of War 2 featured more characters from Greek mythology. These new characters, or bosses, would fight. After defeating each boss, Kratos would receive an additional item. Improvements were made to the AI. This time, they could interact with each other like in the case of Cyclops being mounted by smaller enemies, or enemies surrounding the player. Although it was possible to have a smarter AI, even in the first game, this was ultimately saved for a sequel to keep the pacing and action going in the first one. To further the game's marketing campaign, Sony held a media event in Athens on March 1st, 2007, that featured scantily clad women and a dead goat. In April, the Daily Mail learned of the event from the UK's official PlayStation magazine. They called it a depraved promotion stunt, and reported that Member of Parliament and anti-video game violence campaigner Keith Vaz said he would understand if the incident resulted in a boycott of Sony products. Ultimately, Sony apologized for the event. As the release date approached, developers began to cut content. One enemy who was supposed to appear in God of War 2, Koteris, was cut from the game, perhaps because he was not a beast from Greek mythology. Mount Etna, a cancelled volcanic level, was later adapted in the Atlas level in God of War 2. Originally, the roads level was intended to be bigger. At one point, Kratos was supposed to traverse through the marketplace. In this level, a legion of soldiers attacked Kratos, as well as Cyclops. As Kratos traveled to his city, a war erupted in the background. Perhaps this was meant to be part of either his attempt to save Sparta from Zeus or a mere illusion to torment the fallen god. Oceanus, the Titan of the ocean, was supposed to appear in God of War 2. He was scrapped, and the scene where he kills Hermes was dropped altogether. The original concept art was used for the Poseidon battle. Corey wanted chains to be used for traversal rather than pushing a block. Because of newer team members who created several test levels to challenge their skills, God of War 2 has many unfinished levels. In one level, Kratos rode Pegasus, and Atlantis was supposed to be an entire world in itself. Another cut was the road to Sparta, as well as Hercules, who was intended to be killed in a single blow by Kratos. Chimera and Deimos were also supposed to make an appearance in God of War 2. Cory Barlog is credited as the writer of PSP spin-offs Ghost of Sparta and Chains of Olympus. Ready at Dawn Studios developed both games and laid out the design and story for the third game. Immediately after I finished God of War 2, I was already working on the story and design for the third game. I established the overarching story of how the trilogy ends, as well as the base of the game layout and design. God of War 2 was released on March 13th, 2007, against Insomniac's Ratchet & Clank Size Matters. After its release, the game was banned in the United Arab Emirates because of one topless scene. However, it didn't stop God of War 2 from becoming commercially successful in multiple markets. It sold over 1 million copies in the first 3 months after release, going on to sell over 4 million copies by 2012. Both IGN and GameStop described God of War 2 as the swan song of the PlayStation 2 era.